with some further heavy showers. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
I am Toto Skilashi and you are releasing in 2 of the ball and of News Talk.
We all love Duffer, right, Richie?
Ah, yeah.
We all love a bit of Duffer. Brian Kerr's been talking on Virgin Media. Brian Kerr knows Duffer better than most about
So they're practically dad and son.
Practically. Though for legal reasons, let's say they're absolutely not.
No, they're not in any way related.
Damien Duff could be going to Celtic, obviously, and really thrown himself into the coaching. Brian Kerr was talking about it on Virgin Media this evening.
I don't think he was over enamoured by the attraction of being involved in League of Ireland football. I think he initially did some work with the first team at Shamrock Rovers, but then he decided to take a step back from that and go into the underage stuff. And I think he's found something that's made him happy, that's made him ambitious, that gives him comfort that he can spread a bit of Damien's gospel to young players about what's required to get to the next level, which is a kind of a real dedication and commitment to training and practice. And you know, he talked about his street footballer. We don't have enough street footballers anymore in the way we used to have, in that so many, I mean, this has been dealt with so many people. They don't train or practice often enough. And he has decided that's the way he wants to go. I wasn't sure he would take to the coaching thing as well as he's done. He seems to be enamoured with it. He's been doing some media stuff. I thought he was quite happy doing a bit of that, doing some coaching and living a bit of life as well and looking after his family. His kids are quite young, they went to school now. But it's a big move for him. I don't think it'll happen immediately. I think it's very interesting. I don't think it's too sad that he's not been involved in the League of Ireland as such, which is the top level of the game here. He's not been overly involved with any international stuff either. So I think he goes and he works at club level and sees whether he likes that environment, whether the scrutiny that's involved, even at Celtic with underage teams, whether he'll enjoy that. But who knows how it goes for him. I think he has the intelligence, the experience and the ability to go on in the coaching game if he wants to do it.
Yeah, it's a real turnaround because Duff always said he never would, and then he's inched his way in, and now it seems he's inched his way in so much that he's a bit frustrated at not the lack of professionalism, because look, we're talking about kids, but the way he talks, I want to do 7 days a week. He wants to mould professional footballers.
Frustration was actually the word I was going to use, because I know Brian's actually still quite close to Damien Duff, and they would probably speak on a pretty regular basis. Yeah. So you would figure that he's made his feelings known about where his current position is, that maybe he wanted some level of involvement from the FAI that hasn't come, maybe he wanted to make a step further at Shamrock Rovers that hasn't come for him, and he has seen this opportunity over at Celtic, which, you know, if it does come to pass, it'll be a hell of an opportunity to pass up, and he's taken it. He's a remarkable character, Duffer, when you consider the past few years. He's wanted to prolong his footballing playing career as long as he could, to the point where he went to Australia, to keep going, came back, has done a bit of coaching, so his passion is pretty evident for all to see.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I mean, we don't have many Premier League winners who are willing to get into it, so we'll see how he goes. And Virgin Media Sport, the home of European football in Ireland, more than 400 UEFA Champions League, Europa League, Nations League games live this season. Virgin Media Sport exclusive to all Virgin Media TV customers, who can also download the TV Anywhere app and stream all the action whenever and wherever they like. And there's European action on this evening, and plenty of it.
Yeah, we're taking our information where we can tonight, because it's not very enthralling as regards the games.
Just give us the headlines.
Yeah, our Chelsea 2-0 up at home to PAOK Thessaloniki, 2 Olivier Giroud goals for them inside the first half, and PAOK down to 10 men. Chelsea need just a point to secure themselves top spot in Group L with a game to spare. Meanwhile, it's scoreless in Group G. Rangers 0, Villarreal 0, with 3.5 minutes played, 4 minutes played now in the second half. Rangers playing the second half with 10 men after Daniel Candeas picked up a second yellow card just before the break, and it seems pretty harshly as well. This group is really neatly poised. Rapid Vienna vaulted to the top this evening with a late 2-1 win away to Spartak Moscow. They're on 7 points. Villarreal, should this result stay the same, would also be on 7 points. Rangers on 6 and Spartak on 5 heading into the final round of games. Celtic, meanwhile, they have their fate back within their own grasp following a 1-0 win away to Rosenborg earlier. Scott Sinclair got the only goal 3 minutes before the break, also helped by the fact that RB Leipzig were beaten 1-0 away to Salzburg. Celtic host Salzburg, needing only a draw in a fortnight's time to progress to the knockout stage. And a pretty youthful Arsenal side won 3-0 away to Vorskla tonight. Emile Smith-Rowe, a penalty from Aaron Ramsey and Joseph Willock, all inside the first half, giving Arsenal the win, securing them of top spot in that group. The other live action tonight is in the Bahamas, where Patrick Cantlay leads at the Hero World Challenge, a 7 under par opening round of 65 for the American. As things stand at the moment, he's one shot clear of Patrick Reed, who's currently playing the last, and then we have Henrik Stenson and Dustin Johnson, both on 4 under par.
Thanks, Richie.
The Football Show on Off the Ball.
In association with the faster than ever Boyle Sports app. Multiples made easy and personalised content on every sport. Download it now. Boyle Sports. Time to play.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
So we've got a busy football show for you. David Conn of The Guardian, really brilliant journalist, has spent time in Qatar, 4 years out from the 2022 World Cup. He's going to tell us about his experiences. And we'll also have Keith Andrews talking about Robbie Keane earlier on, which was quite interesting. And we were on the Keith Andrews show earlier on. I joined Keith. Wanted to bring you this just before we hear from David Conn. I think an interesting fella I hadn't heard of. Keith spoke to Stuart Webber. Stuart Webber is the sporting technical director at Norwich. He's only 34 years of age, very impressive fella, had been at Huddersfield initially and was headhunted by Norwich. So he joined myself and Keith, primarily Keith, on the football show this morning. Norwich are top of the championship, incidentally, so he has turned things around and they have sold big players, Wes Hoolahan amongst them, but they've sold lots of their bigger players and they've cut the budget and they told the fans that things would get worse before things would get better. And they've managed to do it over the space of about a year, 18 months. And we'll pick it up here at this point where Stuart Webber is talking to Keith about how one of his big early decisions with the board was whether or not to bring in a new manager and who that manager should be.
During those conversations, I would imagine there would have been a lot of transparency about where the club was. They'd been relegated from the Premier League. Noralec Neil hadn't particularly gone well that season, back in the Championship. And then you arrive, and then one of the first ports of call, I think, was the appointment of the manager of Daniel Farke. What was it that drew you towards him as a manager?
Yeah, well, when I was at Huddersfield, a big part of this job is, succession planning for your key staff and obviously succession planning for players. And, so at Huddersfield, obviously we had David Wagner, who was doing great things. And we always felt that, at some point he would leave Huddersfield, certainly if we didn't get promoted. So, we always had a plan in place as to who would the next person be, or who would the next person be out of a group of people. And one of the people I started speaking to was Daniel. And, I started to get a relationship with him and, realised, watched him work and spoke to a lot of people who played for him and worked under him. And, everything was coming back really positive as, of what he was like. So when I came here, obviously, Alex had left and Al Nervine was in charge until the summer. So we needed a head coach. So, my first job was to go and appoint a head coach. And, I'd be honest with you, I brought over the list that we had at Huddersfield in terms of potential candidates because, the club strategy is very similar here to Huddersfield, just probably on a bigger scale and under much more of a microscope here. And, Daniel was, always a person at the top of that list. And, if you look at our sort of key objectives for our club, one is... we wanted someone to bring in a style of play which we can then build the club on, which will then exceed managerial change in the future. We needed somebody who's got a proven track record of developing players because, we had a financial hole to fill and we weren't going to fill that by selling experienced players because no one wants to buy them. They only want to buy young, up-and-coming players in general. And we needed somebody really open-minded when it comes to recruitment, not we couldn't afford to appoint a coach who would only take players from one market or just have British players, which are really expensive because fundamentally we don't have the money to go and buy loads of experienced Championship players. So that's, he ticked all them boxes. Obviously we've got some deep criteria on that in terms of around the style of play and different things, but they're the sort of key points which he ticked. And that's why we made the decision to go with him.
Well, he's clearly bought into that project, and at times last year you had to make tough decisions, balancing the books. Can you tell us a little bit about how difficult that was? I think you've brought in about 80 million quid in transfer fees with those young players, the likes of the Murphy twins. Obviously, James Maddison went to Leicester in the summer. Shopping in different supermarkets maybe than traditionally Norwich would have been in different countries. Yeah. How difficult has it been to make all those tough decisions?
It's been really tough, and the toughest thing, Keith, has been going through a massive financial transition, which we have to because the owners don't put money in. We're a self-funded club. So going through a massive financial transition, but still maintaining a good level of expectation and hope. Because, it would have been easy to solve the financial problem by just selling all the best players. But then you take away hope from the supporters, from the staff, from the players that have left here and that are still here, because there's players here, we've been selling their mates around them who they know are top players, obviously the ones you've mentioned there, but, even people like John Ruddy, Johnny Howson, Ryan Bennett, all these guys we've had to let go or sell because of financial reasons. And, it's like you've been sat in the dressing room, you've got a group of 20 players sat there going, there's another top player gone, there's another top player, and then we're bringing in players who they've never heard of. And they're going, who's this guy? He's come from the German league, or he's come from the Spanish second division, or he's come from Denmark. And so sort of keeping that balance has been really hard. And what we've tried to do whilst doing that is we've tried to massively improve the environment at the training ground. So we've added, for example, we've added 2 extra pitches. We've put floodlights up around one of the pitches so we can train later on in the afternoons on certain days. We've done out that canteen area and put like a real high-class sort of restaurant facility, because what we wanted to show the players is, we have got some tough times coming up, and yes, we are having to sell really good players, but we're still investing in the club and we're still investing in you to make you better. And I think we got that balance pretty good, because we were always confident the players we were bringing in were good players, but like I say, the lads sat in the dressing room, we've never heard of them. It takes a bit of time to convince them that we will be all right. And, hopefully they've all sort of shown up pretty well now. And, I think the guys who are still here, your sort of Alex Tetties, your Grant Hanleys, the sort of real senior figures in the dressing room, I think, really sort of buying into it as well.
How difficult was it at stages last year? Because obviously all the ins and outs of what's going on behind the scenes. I think you have been very transparent actually in terms of what you've portrayed to the fans in particular, and obviously it's not going to be very popular, is it? Because last season at times performance is understandably up and down. Fans want to get in contention with that top 6 and they want to dream, but checkered in terms of the results, performances last year, but this season in particular you've really just shot on. I suppose it's been that consistency in terms of the relationship between yourself and Daniel Farke, and obviously the players really buying into that.
It is, and it's been really tough because, internally, we've had a plan, we've had a strategy, and, and that's why to be honest, Keith, we're trying to be honest from day one, because we actually knew this is going to get worse before it gets better, unless we just got unbelievably lucky and, started last season, and you just, I don't know, one of your strikers hits it off and you can have a little bit of luck sometimes. But, really, we sat there last summer thinking, what, this is going to get worse before it gets better. So, we were really clear that we've actually got to message that out to supporters, or, we'll get accused of lying, there'll be massive unrest. And I think that worked well. And I got to be honest, the fans stuck with us really well last year through some pretty difficult times, some pretty dire performances, if we're honest. And, I said many a time, if I would have been a paying spectator at some of them games, I would have gone home unbelievably disappointed. And we got that. We never tried to sugarcoat it. We admitted that this isn't what we want it to look like, of course. And we just had to have faith that they would fundamentally keep believing in us, especially at the start of this season, because we knew in the summer, deep down we thought, what, we might not have the individuals that we had last year in terms of the Murphys or Josh Murphy and Maddison, or Angus Gunn, who was obviously exceptional as well. But we actually felt, we think we've got a better group. We think we've got a better balance to our squad. We think we've got a better team spirit. So we were always sort of confident going into this year that we'd be sort of better. Obviously, we've hit it off so far unbelievably well, which is way above our expectations. But we always felt that we'd be a lot stronger this year, which would then hopefully show the supporters and the players and the rest of the staff in the club that, maybe this is going in the right direction and we do want to be a part of it, because, we see so many clubs, where they look like the hope's been ripped apart from them. They're almost a little bit soulless, and we've had to work really hard to make sure that wasn't us. And I think, so far, it seems to be working. And, what it's like now, we've got momentum, everything we do seems to be working, which is nice, and people are buying into it. And, suddenly 0-0 at Hull on Tuesday was seen as a good point, whereas probably last year that would have been seen as, that's rubbish. but it's because the mindset's just different. And hopefully, we've all worked really hard and no more than the manager and the players to turn this around. Hopefully, they can obviously keep it going.
Hi Stuart, it's Joe here. I'm sitting in alongside Keith.
Hi Joe.
And listening with interest. It's fascinating what you've done. When you talk there about actually having to let the fans know that this is going to get worse before it gets better, that's quite an interesting thing. I'm just curious, how did you do that in practical terms? Because there's also the element of not wanting to give players excuses either. Did you have to go out and tell everybody in the local press? Is that how you did it?
Yeah, so what we did, the sort of plan or the strategy with it was we needed to make sure that we had to protect the manager and not make him constantly the spokesman for the club or the bearer of bad news. And we had to protect his relationship with the players. So at no point did the players feel that, let's say selling Johnny Howson was the manager's decision. So I'll be honest with you, Joe, lots of times I've had to take the flak, including in the club or on the outside. And that's fine because, I see part of my job is not, delivering good news. Everyone's capable of doing that, but it's sometimes delivering the less good news. And if it means it protects his relationship with the players, his relationship with supporters, we have to do that because fundamentally, if people want to boo me on a Saturday or whatever, it actually doesn't matter. Whereas what we don't want is then that rubbing off onto the players or the manager. So, because we don't want them to lose their confidence or whatever. So we sort of had a plan that I would sort of keep dropping it in, and we did lots of stuff in the local media. We did a few bits in the national media and called some favours in where we could tell people the truth, but then almost alongside that give them this is a situation, but by the way, this is how we're going to work through it. So rather than just telling everyone the problem, because the problems were easy to talk about, actually talk around the solution. And the key thing for us was internally is we couldn't just say words for the sake of it. So we couldn't say we're going to invest in the academy and we're going to create a real clear bridge for the young players to get in our first team, and then sit here and then never play any young players, because everyone quite rightly, it might buy you a year, but then a year later everyone's ramming them same words down your throat. And by the way, quite rightly, we couldn't talk about doing foreign recruitment and listen, we believe we can get real good value in players abroad, and with this coach and this setup, he can make them better. Again, we couldn't do that and then go and sign a load of journeyman players from the Championship. So what we were really key is at the start is, right, we're going to send a certain message out of this is the club strategy. So rather than people then basically thinking, it's the manager's choice to get rid of all these senior players, make a load of money and then bring a load of kids in, made it very much look like a club sort of thing so we could protect him and the team. But then also as a club, it was like everything we messaged, we've had to constantly review as to, are we on track for that? Are we on track for that? Because if not, it'll come back to hurt you. And fundamentally, I'm a football fan, and I think the thing which hurts a fan more than anything else is not knowing what's going on. You pay a lot of money and it's like, just tell us the truth.
Yeah.
And the big thing we've tried to do is message that of, listen, we'll tell you the truth, but sometimes it won't be a nice truth, because they all want to hear the truth when, the truth is we give in, Emi Buendia a new contract because he's brilliant. We want to hear that. It's better than, by the way, we're selling James Maddison because if we don't, the club will go bust. But we've said, let's be consistent and we'll tell you the good things as well as a few of the bad things.
Stuart, with the way the Championship has gone this year and how condensed, tight it is at the top of the league, and I suppose with the way that you have done in particular, you spoke about the financial restrictions and the way you're trying to run the football club. Is there a temptation come January with the position you're in to maybe speculate, to get over the line and what I think is a really, really wide open Championship, or will it be very much sticking to the plan?
No, very much sticking to the plan. For two reasons. One is financially we're not in a position to have any money to do it. And secondly, if you look at our squad, and I'm just stood in my office now and I've got it in front of us, you've got Grant Hanley hasn't played for about 10 weeks because of injury. He's now fit. Kenny McLean hasn't played since the second game of the season. He's now fully fit. Louis Thompson's only a month away. Was an integral part earlier on in the season. And then you've got Ben Marshall, who's had some illnesses and different things, now fully fit, who can't get back in the team. And they're probably four players at the start of the season we would have said, they'll play probably 60-70% of our games. So we've also got people coming back who can't even make our 18 at the moment. And that's why I think if we were looking at it, so for example, when we were at Huddersfield, the year of promotion, we added two players in the January. We added Izzy Brown on loan from Chelsea, and we added Colin Quaner from Union Berlin. But if you look at that squad, we were really thin, and it's like, we need some help here because we're sort of running out a little bit. Whereas here, touch wood, barring a real serious injury or a real serious drop off of form for somebody, we actually look at the group and go, you know what, we've actually got quite good strength in numbers.
Stuart, listen, it's been fascinating listening to you in depth talk about it. I've enjoyed watching your team for far. Hopefully we'll get to Qatar Road soon. Thanks for taking the time today.
Pleasure. Cheers, Keith.
Thanks,
Cheers. Speak to you soon.
Football on Off the Ball.
In association with the faster than ever Boyle Sports app. Multiples made easy and personalised content on every sport. Download it now. Boyle Sports. Time to play.
The Pat Kenny Show. Back tomorrow.
As well as all the breaking news, we speak with the Fianna Fáil leader Micheál Martin. We talk Euro 2020 with Sports Minister Shane Ross. And we take a special look at the Late Late Toy Show.
The Pat Kenny Show.
With MasterCard.
Tomorrow from 9.
On News Talk.
Look ahead. As far as the eye can see. That's a big future ahead of you. It's as big as your imagination. As big as your ambition. Explore your future at DIT Open Days on Friday the 30th of November from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. and on Saturday the 1st of December from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m.
And in January 2019, DIT, along with IT Tala and IT Blanchardstown, will become TU Dublin, Ireland's first technological university. There's a big future ahead of you at TU Dublin.
What's your M&S Christmas favourite? The Collection mince pies. The perfect ratio of all butter short crust pastry and succulent vine fruits, cranberries, cherries and brandy. Only €3 for 6. Only at M&S. They're my favourite. Offer ends 3rd December. T's and C's apply. Selected stores only, subject to availability.
Thinking of hiring a locksmith? Or do you provide locksmith services? Did you know that locksmiths must hold a PSA licence issued by the Private Security Authority? Locksmiths who operate without a licence and anyone employing one is breaking the law and could face prosecution and fines. For more information on how to get a licence or to report an unlicensed locksmith, visit psa.gov.ie. Issued by the Private Security Authority, the security regulator.
The National Concert Hall is delighted to announce This Way to Christmas, featuring The Snowman, sponsored by BMW. Produced by Theatre Lovett, the 10 shows feature the Snowman with live orchestra, as well as parading nutcrackers, a little match girl, classical Christmas songs and festive dance. This Way to Christmas at the National Concert Hall from the 21st to 23rd of December. Tickets from €19 with family tickets available on 01417 0000 or nch.ie.
The shopping event of the year continues at Harvey Norman. Get Black Friday discounts now. Get the Hoover 10kg washing machine for just €299, saving you €130. Or get the Nordmann freestanding dishwasher for just €199, saving you €70. And at Harvey Norman, we've matched all competitors' Black Friday prices, so no need to shop around. The Harvey Norman Black Friday sale, in store and online. Don't miss out.
Ho, ho, ho! I've joined Repak's Team Green. You see, when you shop with a Repak member, you're supporting recycling in Ireland, and that could make a real difference this festive season. Look out for the Team Green Santa in Repak member stores. Join me on Repak's Team Green, and let's all play our part in recycling. Together, we can become environmental champions this Christmas. Now, don't end up on my naughty list. Visit repak.ie to find out more. Ho, 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 ho.
Make the festive season epic. This Christmas, only Air Prepay gives you great 4G smartphones from just $59.99 with unlimited access to YouTube and social networks like Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp, an extra 20 gigs of data, plus unlimited calls to any network for just a €20 top-up. To enjoy more epic connections, go in store or visit air.ie. Air. Let's make possible. Available on Air Simplicity. For full terms, details and fair usage, see air.ie.
Off the Ball. This is News Talk.
So David Conn is a regular voice on the show, writes for The Guardian, and he has spent some time in Qatar and written about it for The Guardian. 2 pieces across 2 days, well worth reading, and to give us a sense of what he found, he's joined us on the line very kindly. How you doing, David?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
No, appreciate it as ever. So, well, I guess what 21st November 2022, as impossible and improbable as it is, we're going to have the World Cup in Qatar. There's no stopping it now, David.
I think you just said improbable, something like improbable and impossible, and I think I said in my piece is unfeasible and outlandish. And, you know, one of the points of the pieces and one of the points about going there, and people have said, well, what was the main thing that you took away? And one of the main things to take away is this is really happening. You know, they've spent billions of dollars already. They've completely reconfigured their main stadium, and that's finished, that's done. And it is a really kind of awesome stadium, just as a stadium. And they're building 7 completely new stadiums. So any country that's had the World Cup before has been a football country. So matches are at, you know, at their Olympic stadium, and then at their club grounds where big clubs are and where you know, they've got big capacities. Obviously, Qatar didn't have a single stadium that could host any World Cup match, and they had one big stadium, and they bid to host the World Cup, and now they are building 7 entirely new stadiums just for the tournament.
Was this the kind of trip whereby you tried to go in as undercover as possible and see everything that you could possibly see, or was it more of a Qatar PR exercise where they invited several journalists over?
No, it wasn't either. So we decided that we didn't want to go kind of, it's not, I mean, people don't exactly go undercover, but they'll go unannounced, and they want to write about the workers, obviously the migrant workers situation, and people have gone. I mean, The Guardian has been quite a leader in exposing the plight of migrant workers, and it wasn't me that did it. It was mainly a journalist he's actually based in Nepal called Pete Patterson, because a lot of the workers are Nepali, and he came across, obviously, people dying and coming back home to Kathmandu in body bags, and hearing the stories about people living in squalor and being underpaid. So he has done a lot of that work of exposing the conditions in the camps. And we decided, not even just me, but my editors decided that they wanted us to go through the front door and speak to the people organising the World Cup, who are called the Supreme Committee in Qatar, and to the government, because the government is responsible for migrant workers, and they've got a process of reform, of improvement, and that we wanted to engage with them and talk to them about the conditions. And we did want to do a piece about these stadiums, and we wanted to have access to what is the World Cup going to be like in 2022. But at the same time, and so it was only us, it wasn't a number of journalists, but at the same time, I was very conscious that I didn't want to be on a guided tour for 3 days. And they were very grown up about that. Like, they knew that we were not going to be guided around for the whole time. And so I did spend time going to meet workers on my own, completely unaccompanied. And, perhaps not surprisingly, that's where the toughest, harshest and most scandalous stories came from.
Yeah, OK. Well, we'll come to that for sure. I mean, it's good to know it wasn't a North Korean type exercise, because it's sometimes hard to know from afar.
But also being fair to them.
Yeah, they understood that.
Yeah, they did understand it. And, they are quite grown up about it. And the government is even publicly now saying we're in a reform process for workers' rights, and their stance is we're prepared to accept criticism and act on it. And so it is more grown up than people might think. And you're asking questions all the way along, and they know it's not going to be some kind of PR job, but they just want you to be fair about what you've seen. So I think it's only fair for me to say that, and not to, they gave me a lot of help in showing me around, and it included they took us to 3 labour camps. They took us to the camps. Otherwise, it'd be very hard to get in anyway. They're fairly grown up. I mean, they've been hammered and they've been criticised such a lot. And, I think it is to the credit of the government that at the point last year, which I think was October last year, they were facing an investigation by the International Labour Organization, which is a UN agency. And they took the decision at that point to cooperate with them in a reform process. And so, you should. That's a fact. That's happening. So you should give that credit and engage with it and see where it's at.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Fairly assess it.
And so seeing as we've kind of started gone down the migrant worker route, we'll stick with it for a moment. I know you talked about speaking with some workers from Ghana, and a fairly typical story in that they went through an agent who promised them the world. Qatar is the richest country in the world. You can Google it. One man told me, he said we'd earn a huge salary. When we came here, we found it was the opposite. I think you worked out certainly £5 a day was maybe a decent barometer for what a huge percentage of the workers are getting. What did you find? So that was one example of a number of workers from Ghana that you spoke to. What did you find generally amongst the workers?
Yeah, so when we said to the people in Qatar, the government and the Supreme Committee that was organising the World Cup, I mean, that was in one of their camps. That was in a camp that they were showing to us as model accommodation. And they still have 4 people to a room, 4 men to a room. And one point which really hit me hard, but which they don't seem to see as any kind of issue, is the fact that the whole system is based on men leaving their families. Men leave their families from India, from Nepal, from Bangladesh, from Africa, and go and build basically the Gulf, go and build in what are now the richest countries on earth because of oil and gas. And these countries, they're very much built on the family, and even obviously they're not democracies, and the rulers is a family, it's a dynasty, and yet the whole place is built on taking men away from their families, and they send money home. So it's all men in these camps, and they were showing us that, look, we make meals for them now. Look, it's clean. Look, there's separate showers. Look, there's a recreation room, and it's really it's basic provision that they're trying to show us, this dramatic improvement from the squalor they were in before, which it is. It is an improvement, but, it didn't feel to us something to really shout about, that, people have basically got a roof over their heads and they're fed, right?
Yeah.
And then when we asked them about the money, and they told us it was, £35 a week to build the World Cup stadiums. I mean, come on.
Yeah, in the context of 8 to 10 billion being spent. And it was interesting when you put the low wages or the circumstances to different officials in Qatar, their general sense was, well, where they've come from is pretty terrible, so this ain't so bad.
I'm afraid that is like an immediate response that you get from people is, well, it's a lot more than they get at home. And that's obviously the case. These people have left Nepal, India and Bangladesh, and they're living in, I thought it was really important for me to include this, they're living in really terrible conditions in a lot of those places where, somebody who's very familiar with those places, I've quoted him in the piece, saying, they're living in places with no drinkable water, with no infrastructure whatsoever, with no work, with terrible conditions. And, it's really important to understand that. And that's another whole area of injustice that perhaps we're not covering enough because I haven't bid to host a World Cup.
Yeah.
But in Qatar, that was the answer. Well, they're getting more than they get at home. And I would say, but these are the richest people in the world per capita, the Qataris. So I just said to some of them quite simply, yeah, but if you just look at your country and where they are now, you could pay them a bit more. And I got quite blank looks in response to that.
Right.
And one thing which people said was that there is now an advisory minimum wage. There isn't a legal minimum wage in Qatar, but that's one of the reforms that they're working towards. And I think they will bring it in.
Right.
But the advisory minimum wage is 750 Qatari riyals a month. And so when you work that out, that's only £40 a week. That's the advisory minimum wage. And these people are doing really hard graft, and they're doing it in really still very hot and humid conditions. And not only that, but they're building what's going to be the most glittering World Cup ever, probably, with its slogan, deliver amazing, for the richest country on earth as a nation projecting exercise. That's the real PR exercise, isn't it? Hosting the World Cup itself.
Sure. They're expecting to welcome 1.5 million fans for 2022. You raised the question, I wonder what they do for their leisure time, in part because, you take Doha and the list of tourist destinations or tourist activities runs quickly into shopping malls, which is one aspect of the experience. And you make the point, this is still very much a conservative Muslim country. Homosexuality is illegal. There's calls for modest dress, particularly for women at the stadiums. Drinking alcohol prohibited in public, allowed only in licensed bars and hotels. These are not the traditions we associate with the World Cup experience. Take alcohol, for instance. Are they going to suddenly license a whole lot more bars and establishments and hotels to cater for the demand, or will this be a fairly dry World Cup?
Well, as I put in my piece, given the behaviour of some England fans when they do get to drink in public at football tournaments, I didn't feel like that was a real campaigning point for me, that we must have alcohol in all public places in Doha.
Look how wonderful it could be, Qatar, if you let the drink out.
Maybe they are the ones who actually have got the right idea, and also they think that they will get a lot of supporters from the Middle East and from other Arab countries and Muslim countries who obviously don't drink. So maybe there will be a different atmosphere in that regard. And it's not just England fans who have a drinking culture, although England fans do have a massive drinking culture. Not all of them, obviously. It is... Those are big puzzles. How are they actually going to cater for all these people? Doha is a very ordered place, a very hierarchical place, a quiet place. There's almost very little crime or disturbance on the streets, and they're just going to have an absolute deluge, obviously, of people from all over the world. But to be honest, from that point of view, there's always worries about World Cups, aren't there? Like South Africa was going to be crime, it's going to be terrible crime. Brazil was going to be riots and crime. Russia was going to be hooliganism and getting beaten up, and the LGBT issue. And in general, a World Cup is a great experience, and it sort of carries the whole thing, doesn't it? The World Cup itself tends to carry the whole thing.
You go and visit some of the stadiums. I must confess, I was under the misapprehension that the new air-cooled stadiums, that this thing had been proven to be impossible, actually. I thought this was...
Yeah, exactly. That's what we all thought.
Right. So you mentioned it was developed in your piece in The Guardian by a scientist at Qatar University, Dr. Saud Gandhi. And so you went to see Ghani, Ghani, Dr. Saud Ghani. And you said it's like air conditioning outside in your piece. So you were there, you felt the coolness, it was okay,
yes.
Really amazing. I felt the
cool, and I felt the cool. And my photographer colleague Tom Jenkins, this Dr. Saud Ghani was a really good character to talk to. He was very sort of ebullient character, and he'd spent a lot of time in England. His family still lives in England, and he trained at Nottingham University, I think it was, and Wolverhampton or Sheffield, and taught at Sheffield and Wolverhampton.
Right.
And that's one thing that happens in Qatar, by the way, is that you meet Qataris he's Sudanese, he wasn't in Arab dress, he's not a Qatari, but you meet Qataris in full Arab dress who've got very important positions, like the head of the Supreme Committee himself, and they turn out to have studied in England or in the US, and some of them in quite sort of obscure places. Like the head of the Supreme Committee did his A-levels in Scunthorpe.
Well, of course.
And did law at Sheffield University. And one of the guys, when we were going around the stadium, he said he was head of safety at the stadium, and he's called Abdullah Al-Bishri, very friendly, nice guy. And he said he studied engineering at South Tyneside College in South Shields, and I was there in Doha, sort of still with a bit of a desert wind, and it's amazing, really. And so from that point of view, English people, Irish people, European people, I think they will find a warm welcome there. And people speak English, and they're very Western facing, and people have studied in the UK and the US. Anyway, the air cooling.
Yeah.
So sorry, he was a real ebullient character, and he was telling us about how his family still lives near Chesterfield, believe it or not. And Tom, my photographer colleague, just christened him Dr. Cool, because of, he's developed the air cooling system. And I remember when I went to Doha in 2011 and for some interviews, and their pitch was like, we can host it in the summer.
Yeah.
Even though temperatures are like 50 degrees or whatever they are, and humidity, it's just impossible because we're going to have this air cooling.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that you thought it'd been proven not to work, because we all just thought it was kind of just a wheeze, to have a bid, and it wasn't real.
Yeah.
But honestly, they've got it. They've got it working in that Khalifa International Stadium. That's the one that's been reconfigured. I think it's 40,000 seats. It might even be 60,000, and it's hosting the World Athletics Championships next year. It's got a track round it. And in the Al Sadd Stadium, which is a local stadium of the club where Xavi is playing, they've got it. They've got air cooling. And we went to watch a match, and it honestly is like air conditioning outside. And Dr. Ghani, Dr. Cool, he's saying they're now already using it for agriculture, and they're going to try and extend it. Like, they think it could have a rollout for all sorts of outdoor spaces in hot countries. So like playgrounds, school playgrounds could be air-cooled, he said.
Okay.
And, just like air conditioning is a feature of our lives that was once really futuristic, air cooling outside, is something that in 20 years' time just won't seem strange.
Fascinating. I had no idea. I was going to read out a paragraph you wrote to people just to give them. It's a good sense of Doha life, I think. So you write at one point, even being in Doha for even a few days prompts the same scepticism which has always smothered the Qatar bid. It's a small, claustrophobic city of skyscrapers and malls where people mostly do not walk because in the hot, impossibly humid summer, only the migrant workers who built it all spend any time outside. All societies are unequal in class space to some extent, but in Qatar, the divides are extreme. And you talk about the Qataris, many of them English or US educated, as we've discussed, have been blessed with the most privileged lives. The 1.7 million migrant workers are mostly men from the Indian subcontinent, brought thousands of miles from their families, housed in camps, no question of citizenship. And there is an atmosphere, you say, of subservience. The government denies that it institutionalises segregation, pointing out that the workers are free to go to public places. But we saw uniformed security staff turning away Bangladeshi workers on their Friday off from even walking through the Souq Waqif complex of shops and restaurants, reserving it as a strolling haven for tourists and Qatari families. I thought that was interesting insight into the humdrum of what life is like over in Doha. And you can expand on that by all means. And then before the clock comes against us, I wanted to get your sense. How close exactly are all these stadiums? Like, is everybody going to just be staying in the one spot, or will people be spread out?
Yeah, listen, thanks for reading that out, and thanks for, reading so like having read so attentively the pieces and going into depth. I actually really appreciate that. And, I tried to be respectful as well, because I didn't want to just be Mr. Perfect, dropping into another country where, to be honest, I was being welcomed. I was being treated very well. I was meeting the top people. And I didn't want to come sniffily condemning another society. And at the same time as I was doing my work, in the UK, we had a UN rapporteur on extreme poverty reporting on people being homeless in the UK and people being, going to food banks and people being poor. And his report says that our government has made a political decision to impoverish people. And we're doing Brexit, which is sort of, in my opinion, a domestic and international disaster. So it was not really the right time for someone from the UK to be dropping in on other countries and picking fault. So I wanted to be fair. And I hope that is a fair picture being painted. But the fact is, the Souq Waqif is about the only tourist place, it's not a specifically tourist place, but it's the only real place in Doha where it'd be like a country like Egypt or Morocco, more of a more historic Middle Eastern city, because these places in the Gulf, they were incredibly basic until oil was discovered in very recent times, right? So the Souq Waqif is made to look like an old Arab souk, when actually it's newly built to look old. But it's the one place they've got nice restaurants, they've got nice shops, and you go and walk around and have a bit of a street experience, and it's about the only place in Doha. And we saw with our own eyes, it was a Friday, and that is the one day that the workers get off. they're all men, like I said earlier, and we saw groups of young men, really peaceful they are. They're remarkably peaceful and law-abiding, walking through. I think they look Bangladeshi to me, possibly Pakistan, possibly Indian, and they were being turned away. One group after another was being turned away. And then Tom went to try to go to the Corniche, which is a strip of sort of beach, anyway, by the side of the sea that looks out on the skyscrapers on the other side. And he saw people being stopped from even going onto the Corniche. And then when I interviewed the workers, the Bangladeshi guys just down in Doha, unaccompanied, I asked them about it, and they said, yeah. We suffer these terrible conditions, then we want to go for a walk along the sea and we get stopped and we get told it's not for you. And that happened, and we saw that with our own eyes. So it's a very, it's a very hierarchical society. It's the richest country on earth. And, I use this phrase, it's the World Cup of inequality. I'm not condemning, I really don't want to be seen as being, like I say, sniffily, critical and judgmental. But the facts are, you can Google it. It's the richest per capita country on earth, and it's being built by people from the poorest because they're from the poorest, and they will come and do that.
Yeah, and then in 30 seconds, if you can, because I'm going over and I'm about to get in a lot of trouble.
Sorry, no. You've got me on pet subjects.
No, it's very interesting. And people should read the piece, and it's still on the Guardian website.
Thank you.
Just the spread of stadiums. Will everybody be in Doha, or how will this work?
Right. There's only really one city in Qatar, Doha.
Yeah.
The furthest away, like they have this as a kind of virtue of this World Cup, that it's going to be like the Olympics where it's one city really. So they do accept that, and they say the furthest away there's something like the furthest away is 70 kilometres, and they're building a whole new metro system so that people can get out to them, and they're saying everything's going to be within reach. And people will be will be staying really close by, and they're presenting that as a virtue. And I actually think it will work probably in the end, because World Cups tend to, but it was Qatar's World Cup bid, wasn't it? The World Cup in the desert, and they're building it from scratch.
Yeah, okay. It's going to be different in a few fronts, to say the least. People should read your piece, as I said, in The Guardian. David, thanks as ever, much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks.
Off the Ball
on News Talk.
Designed to stand out, the new Lexus NX demands attention at every turn. Our midsize SUV is a self-charging hybrid featuring satellite navigation with connected services and Lexus safety system as standard, so you're always ready for the future. And now you can choose from a range of flexible payment options or avail of our hybrid trade-up allowance worth €2,000. Experience the luxurious new NX at your Lexus retailer. Lexus. Experience amazing.
Over 2 centuries, one family business in Dublin has earned a name for excellence in funeral care. Every day they continue to work hard to retain that good name. The name is Fannigan's. Dubliners trust Fannigan's to take care of them on their final journey with empathy, compassion and dignity. And Fannigan's never forget whose journey it is. In over 200 years, some things don't change. Fannigan's, when your thoughts are with them, ours are with you.